Hello and welcome back to the channel. You saw the title of the video, and for those of you considering documentary work, perhaps for the first time, I want to help you as much as possible. Now, I've done a lot of documentary work over the years, and at first glance it seems pretty easy. You take your camera, you point it at something, you tape it, you edit it together, boom, story. But there's a lot more. In case you didn't know, so much of the work that I've done is documentary in nature because I started out as a freelance news photographer and reporter, and later I became a broadcast journalist. And I picked up some valuable lessons about documentary work along the way. So today I want to share with you guys 5 tips for making a documentary. Let's go. Now, for me, the first and maybe the most important step of making a documentary is knowing your subject. The reason I say this is documentaries are stories. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And to most effectively tell that story, you as a filmmaker have to know each part of those parts of the story before you start filming. Now, this isn't always going to be the case, since if you're filming anything in real life, there's always a chance things will change and you may have to follow wherever it goes. But I found that it makes it easier for me to know how to plan the shoot if you do your research first. Take the film I'm working on now about a class of recruits at a law enforcement academy. Now, I've done this project literally dozens of times over the years, and because I'm familiar with the process of how these recruits are trained, I know in advance what questions to ask the subjects, and I know what moments I'll need to make it as dramatic and interesting as possible. You don't always get that lucky. Sometimes you may be hired for a job where you have no connection to the material and you're unfamiliar with the subject. In those cases, you really do need to ask questions and find out what the focus of your story is going to be, find out who the best people are to interview, determine what other resources you might need, for example, pictures, news articles, videos, home movies, and craft your story based on the research that you've done. Depending on the focus and the reach of your documentary, you may have one interview subject in mind or several. So let's say you want to do a focused short doc on a boxer like this one. We didn't necessarily need to speak to other people in the film because we were primarily interested in understanding his own viewpoint on the sport, his technique, his relationship to his family, and of course, his training. It was enough to just ask him questions and no one else. If, on the other hand, going back to the Training Academy video, you're documenting the journey of dozens of people, you are likely to hear from several of those people. In each case, it is helpful to find out what stories they are willing to tell you. That way you can determine not only if they have a good story to tell in the first place and where to place them in the documentary, but also, frankly, if they're just good on camera. Because there's nothing worse than trying to pull a good soundbite from someone who's very uncomfortable on camera or just doesn't speak very well. Maybe not their fault, talking on camera can be a really difficult thing for some people to do. But you make it easier on yourself as the editor if you choose to interview people who can deliver the sound bites that you need. So definitely do those pre-interviews. Tip number 3, plan your shots. You should never, ever go into a project without it having a very clear vision of what you want it to look like. That means knowing what frame rate you're going to use, what focal lengths for your lenses, whether you're going to be shooting scenes at night or during the day, whether you're going to be shooting action shots or not. Then you'll know what gear you're going to use for each day of the shoot. Now, this isn't to say that you want wildly different looks for the same projects. Usually those looks remain consistent. But knowing you want a smooth camera move for some action shots, for instance, means you better charge your batteries for the gimbal the night before and bring it along. Or pack your lights and softboxes for interviews and be prepared when you need them. Because wasting time on a documentary is a critical mistake. There are moments that happen that will never happen again. And if you miss those moments, they're gone. There are a couple of types of documentaries. One where the filmmaker becomes part of the project. He or she is the narrator. Maybe he or she is telling a personal story. He or she will conduct the interviews and be on camera. Now, most of the projects I have been involved in are not like that. I tend to tell stories from the point of view or views of the subjects in the film. And to be most effective in capturing the events of their lives, you have to become invisible. People get really funny when you point a camera at them. They'll act differently or try to be more formal or shut down completely to the point where they won't even be able to use complete sentences. The only way I found to get around that is to constantly be present. It's kind of an ironic truth, actually, that the more you make yourself part of the scenery, the less they notice you. If you are even just in the vicinity and holding your camera, not even necessarily filming at the time, then eventually people stop paying attention to you altogether. Also, when conducting interviews, I try to be as informal as possible and talk to the subjects as if they are talking to a friend or a family member. I tell them, look, don't pay attention to the camera. It's just a conversation between you and me. Forget the camera's even there. Focus on me, talk to me. And finally, to see the illusion that I am invisible, I always have to remind the interview subjects to answer my questions as if I never asked them in the first place. So for example, if I ask, what's your name? The answer should be, my name is, John Smith or whatever the name is. That way I guarantee that no one will have to hear me asking the question. I become invisible. Check it out. Finally, tip number 5. Let the subjects tell their story. Let's say you've done all the research, you've done pre-interviews, you have a pretty specific understanding of what your subjects are going to say. That doesn't mean that you don't allow them to express themselves. Sometimes as the interviewer, the best thing you can do is ask a question and then just let them answer for as long as they want. Because sometimes in those answers, you hear something that you didn't anticipate, something that may be extremely personal to them and maybe even emotional. Now, when you pick up on that, you can now dig a little deeper. And then when you ask the right question about that personal moment, that's when you usually get the most honest answers. Now, people I've interviewed have often come to tears when you let them have their say, and you can say it's callous or exploitative, but that moment is the moment every interviewer is looking for, when the subject is just letting it all hang out, every emotion raw, unfiltered, and true, because that's what people want to watch. Anyway, there's a lot more to documentary filmmaking, obviously, but I hope these 5 basic tips help you get started. And if this content was helpful to you, please like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one. Peace.